The sea is calm tonight, yet its voice is ancient. Waves roll in slow rhythms, carrying whispers of forgotten times. The moonlight paints silver paths across the endless horizon. Beneath the surface, secrets stir, patient and eternal. There is a story the ocean keeps, hidden in its depths. It begins not with thunder, but with silence and wonder. Long ago, before maps were drawn, people lived by the tides. They trusted the sea for food, for songs, for guidance, and they feared it too, for the ocean remembers all things. Legends spoke of Poseidon, lord of waters, keeper of storms. Some called him protector, others a test of mortal faith. But beyond his trident and waves, he held a greater mystery. The eternal flame, a light said to burn beneath the sea. A fire that no flood, no storm, no shadow could extinguish. It was not flame of destruction, but of memory and hope. Those who dreamed of it felt warmth deep within their hearts. Tonight, we open the tide of that story. Step into its waters. Listen closely, for the waves carry more than foam and salt. They carry the beginning of a journey, where myth becomes breath. The village lay where land met the restless blue horizon. Its houses stood low, built of stone and driftwood, weathered by salt and sun. Every dawn the tide crept in gentle, and every dusk it retreated with grace. The people lived in rhythm with waves, never apart from the breath of the sea. Children played on wet sands, their laughter carried out with the gulls. Old men mended nets, their hands strong yet tender with every knot. Women sang soft songs as they wove baskets, voices blending with the surf. Life was simple, but never small, for the ocean gave more than it took. Fishermen rose before dawn, guided only by stars and the scent of wind. They spoke of the sea as if she were a mother, both stern and loving. When storms arrived, they bowed their heads, knowing power beyond words. But when the skies cleared, gratitude filled their hearts like sunlight. No war drums, no steel, only the eternal dialogues of water and earth. Legends were their treasure, carried across generations like shells in hand. Around fires they told tales of Poseidon, the unseen guardian of tides. Some swore they had heard his trident strike beneath the waves. Others dreamed of temples hidden far below, glowing with mystery. For the villagers, Poseidon was no distant god, but a presence in every ripple. Every prayer, every offering of bread or wine was left at the shoreline. The children asked if he listened, and the elders smiled, saying always. There was a sense of balance, fragile but steady, between sea and land. The villagers did not chase riches, for the ocean gave enough. They believed wealth was not gold, but the return of boats at dawn. Each life was bound to the tide, each dream shaped by the horizon. And yet, beneath the calm, the sea sometimes whispered strange songs. Late at night, when the moon shone, full, waves carried voices not of men. Soft hums drifted in from afar, like a choir deep under the water. The villagers grew silent then, listening with reverence and unease. Perhaps these were spirits, perhaps memories of the ocean itself. No one knew, yet all felt the truth pressed close, like a heartbeat. One evening, a fisherman named Callis stood on the rocks and thought. He had sailed further than most, chasing stars beyond familiar routes. He told the village he saw lights beneath the waves, moving like fire. Not lanterns, not fish, but flames glowing in water without dying. The elders nodded quietly, for they had heard such stories before. It was said Poseidon kept a secret flame, hidden below the sea. A light not meant to burn, but to guide hearts through the unknown. Callis swore the flame was real, for he felt its warmth in the cold night air. Children gathered around him, wide-eyed, listening to his words. He spoke of silence that trembled, of waters that seemed alive with breath. Though many doubted, none dismissed the tale, for the sea was endless. The village carried on as before, yet a seed of wonder had been planted. Each morning, as they pushed boats into the surf, they looked deeper. Every wave seemed different now, every tide heavier with meaning. The calm before the tide had begun, though none could name it yet. The sea had shifted, subtle and slow, and the people felt its weight. Not fear, not dread, but an anticipation, like air before a storm. The village lived as it always had, yet something vast stirred nearby. And from that stirring, a journey unlike any before would rise. The first signs came not with thunder, but with silence deeper than night. Fishermen returned at dawn with stories of tides moving against the wind. Nets once filled with silverfish came back empty, heavy with only water. Birds that had circled the cliffs for years took sudden flight and vanished. The ocean did not rage, yet its breath carried a new weight in the air. Children who played by the rocks said the waves hummed low songs at dusk. The elders grew quiet, their eyes searching the horizon with hidden worry. At the marketplace, whispers spread like smoke, soft but never fading. Some said the sea was restless, shifting beneath unseen currents of power. Others claimed Poseidon was stirring, preparing to speak once more. Each evening, the sunset lingered longer, painting skies with strange colors. Shadows on the water seemed to stretch farther, as if reaching for shore. Boats rocked uneasily, even when anchored tight against the docks. A merchant's daughter dreamed of blue fire burning beneath the waves. Her voice trembled as she told her father, who crossed himself in silence. Dreams spread like a tide through the village, carrying visions of light. A shepherd far inland swore he heard the sea roaring from the hills. Fishermen saw dolphins leaping in circles, as if guarding some secret. The villagers felt it in their bones, a turning of time, a slow awakening. Yet no storm came, only the strange quiet, heavy as stone on the shore. Callis returned one night, eyes wide, hands shaking like reeds in the wind. He had gone alone to the deeper waters, chasing the glow he once saw. There, he said, the currents moved in spirals, glowing faint in the dark. Shapes passed below his boat, vast yet silent, like guardians of the deep. And through the stillness, he heard a low hum, steady as a heartbeat. It was not threatening, he said, but it was immense, endless, eternal. He spoke of the ocean as alive, aware, and waiting for something near. The villagers listened, torn between fear and reverence for the unknown. An elder rose then, his voice firm, carrying memory of generations past. He told of the whisper of currents, a time foretold in oceanic lore, when the sea would change its rhythm, calling hearts toward its secret, not as punishment, but as invitation, a passage into hidden truth. The flame of Poseidon, he said, would rise again through the silence. It was not a tale for children, but a warning written in water and wind. No one slept easily that night, for the waves spoke louder than words. Doors remained open, lamps burned, and ears strained for sound of the tide. Some dreamed of voices singing from below, others of eyes in the deep. Yet all awoke with the same unshaken sense. The ocean was speaking. Morning brought no storm, only skies too still, as if holding their breath. The gulls returned not at dawn, and even the dogs barked at empty air. Every heartbeat in the village seemed tuned to the pull of the sea. Children asked what the sea wanted, but no elder dared to answer. Mothers held them close, whispering only that change was near. And in the silence of that day, the ocean whispered louder still. Currents tugged against the shore, unseen yet certain, shaping destiny. The whisper of currents had come, and with it, the world would turn. The oracle's home stood at the edge of the cliffs, where sea mist veiled the sky. She was old, older than memory, her eyes clear as polished stone. The villagers climbed the winding path, their steps heavy with silence. They sought her wisdom, for whispers of the tide had grown too strong. The oracle waited, seated before a flame that never seemed to fade. Her voice carried like wind through reeds, soft yet unyielding. "You feel the pull," she said, "for the sea is no longer at rest. The currents speak, and their language is older than the stars." She closed her eyes, letting the salt air pass over her face. In the hush, even gulls did not dare to cry, as if listening too. Visions came to her, carried by the rhythm of waves below. She saw waters rising, not with rage, but with purpose and design. The sea spread wide, swallowing paths and fields, yet leaving silence, not ruin. The people shifted uneasily, hearts torn between awe and fear. "What does it mean?" asked Callis, his voice low as twilight. The oracle lifted her hands, tracing shapes unseen in the air. "It means the time of balance is breaking," she said without tremor. "The ocean will rise, and with it, the truth long hidden." They pressed closer, desperate for answers, but afraid of them too. "The flood will not destroy," she whispered, "but it will transform. It will carry you from what you know into what must be remembered." She spoke of the eternal flame, long concealed in the heart of the sea. Not fire of flesh, nor fire of ruin, but fire of endless memory. It burned not to consume, but to preserve all that was lost. "Only those who listen may find it," she warned, "and only with trust." Her words fell like stones into water, rippling through every soul. Some bowed in reverence, others clenched their hands with doubt. Yet none could turn away, for the weight of her voice held them fast. "The sea does not ask," she said. "It calls, and you must choose. The flame waits, and its light will guide those who seek with courage." A child stepped forward, clutching a seashell tight to her chest. "Will we be safe?" she asked, her eyes wide as the horizon. The oracle smiled faintly, her face softened by the fire's glow. "Safety is not given," she said, "but the sea gives life, not endings." Her words did not erase fear, yet they planted seeds of hope. The villagers left in silence, the cliffs echoing with their thoughts. Below them, the tide moved strangely, curling in circles unseen before. The whispers grew louder, as if the water itself had heard the prophecy. Callis walked apart from the rest, his gaze locked on the horizon. He felt the flames pull more fiercely than the others could know. Dreams returned to him each night, filled with light that burned without smoke. The oracle's words became his compass, silent but insistent in his heart. The village gathered once more that evening, flames flickering in the square. They spoke of journeys, of signs, of whether to follow the sea's call. Some argued it was folly to chase myths into uncertain waters. Others believed destiny had arrived, wrapped in the whisper of tides. The oracle remained upon her cliff, watching stars bloom in the dark. Her gaze lingered on the ocean, as if seeing far beyond its edge. The people below prepared for change, though none knew its shape. Dreams, visions, and currents had braided into one unbroken thread. And at the center of it all burned the eternal flame, unseen yet waiting. The prophecy had been spoken, and the tide had already begun to rise. Beneath the village temple lay chambers carved by hands long forgotten. The walls were lined with shells and stones that shimmered faintly in torchlight. Few had entered those halls, for they were sacred, guarded by silence. It was said the first builders had shaped them under guidance of the sea. Stories claimed Poseidon himself had blessed the stone with his breath. Within those hidden depths rested the tale of the eternal flame. Not all believed, yet all respected the weight of such a legend. The flame was said to live in a vessel untouched by time or tide. A light that burned without air, glowing in the darkness of the deep. Priests spoke of it as memory itself, fire that remembered beginnings. When storms struck, villagers prayed not to escape, but to endure. They whispered that the unseen flame gave them strength through fear. Children learned of it from lullabies sung beneath the sound of waves. The fire that does not drown, the mothers sang, guides us in dreams. Generations had passed, yet the story never faded, only deepened. Some believed the flame was hidden far below, past coral and stone. Others claimed it rested beneath the temple, waiting to be revealed. Callis listened with fierce devotion, every tale binding tighter to his heart. He believed he had glimpsed its glow in the spirals of the sea. The oracle's words gave certainty to what once was only wonder. He dreamed of fire beneath water, of light carried through endless dark. The villagers gathered often in the temple, seeking answers in shadows. They left offerings of bread, shells, and wine at the altar. Prayers rose with smoke, curling toward carvings of waves and tridents. The priest spoke softly, reminding them the flame was not possession. It cannot be taken, only revealed when the sea chooses, he said. His words calmed some, yet stirred hunger in others to seek it. The mystery of the hidden flame pressed into their thoughts like tide. At night, visions came unbidden. Dreams filled with warm and steady light. Even those who doubted awoke with the scent of salt in their breath. The legend was no longer distant, but near, alive, urgent. One evening, Callis returned to the temple long after the fires burned low. He touched the carvings of waves, tracing their curves with rough hands. He whispered a vow to the unseen god, to find the flame himself. Not for glory, not for treasure, but for the village and its survival. The temple seemed to breathe with him. Stones warm beneath his palm. He thought he heard water flowing deep below, though no river ran there. The sea and the temple were bound, mirrors of one another. The flame was the heart of that bond, a promise left in silence. The next morning, the villagers gathered again to hear the priest. He told of old texts hidden in the deepest chamber of the temple. They spoke of a path beneath the sea, marked by glowing coral, a passage that led to the resting place of the eternal flame. The people trembled, for the tale was no longer myth, but map. Callis felt destiny stir within him, a current he could not resist. The legend had shifted into a call, and he would be the one to follow. The temple bells rang that evening, echoing across the water. Each sound seemed to sink into the sea, as if carrying their prayers. The village knew the time of waiting was over, and the search would begin. The eternal flame, once only story, now pulsed at the edge of reality. It was hidden still, but its light pressed close, ready to be revealed. The waters began to rise with a patience that unsettled the heart. At first it was the streams, swollen and wide, flowing heavier than rain allowed. Fields that once shimmered with wheat grew heavy with pools of standing water. Children splashed where grain had been, their laughter edged with unease. The villagers spoke softly, as if afraid the ocean might overhear. No storm had come, no thunder rolled, yet the tides crept higher each day. The shoreline shifted, erasing paths walked for generations. Boats floated where livestock once grazed, tethered to fence posts now half drowned. The air smelled different, briny, rich with salt carried farther inland. The gulls screamed less, circling instead as if searching for lost ground. Callis stood each evening on the rocks, watching waves climb higher. He felt not fear, but certainty, the prophecy drawing closer with each tide. The oracle had spoken truly, and the sea answered with silence. Not rage, villagers gathered at the temple, prayers rising louder than before. Some begged for mercy, others for guidance, all for hope. The priest reminded them that the flame was not a weapon, but a promise. "It does not burn to destroy," he said, "but to light a path." Still, worry spread like mist, creeping into every home, every breath. Fishermen found their nets tangled with seaweed not known to these waters. Strange shells washed ashore, glowing faintly as if lit from within. At night, the surf glimmered with a blue light, soft but unearthly. Children whispered of lanterns beneath the waves, dancing where eyes could not follow. The rising waters were not violent, but they were unstoppable. Walls built of stone crumbled slowly as the sea pressed gently against them. The people moved higher, carrying what little they could. The village square echoed with the sounds of wood, rope, and hurried hands. Even in their labor, there was no chaos, only quiet resolve. They knew resistance was futile, for the sea always claimed what it touched. Callis gathered a small group, those willing to search beyond the shore. He spoke of the hidden passage, the coral gate, the promise of the flame. His voice carried conviction, enough to still the trembling of others. "We cannot stop the sea," he said, "but we can listen to it." His words spread quickly, stirring courage where despair had rooted. The oracle remained silent, watching the horizon as if counting each wave. She did not forbid them, nor did she bless them, only let them go. The people prepared their boats, reinforced with tar and prayer. Nets were left behind, replaced by torches and offerings to the god. Every soul felt the pull of the tide, drawing them outward, onward. The waters had risen, and the land shrank with every dawn. Yet in the hearts of the villagers burned something stronger than fear. It was wonder, steady and luminous, like the flame itself. For they sensed the flood was not an ending, but a beginning. The sea had risen not to erase, but to guide them toward destiny. And with every wave that touched their feet, the eternal flame called louder. Its light waited, hidden still, but nearer with every tide that climbed. The morning dawned with skies painted in gray and silver, the sea calm but vast. Boats lined the shore, rocking gently as if eager for the journey ahead. Families stood nearby, faces half hidden in mist, their eyes fixed on the horizon. No one spoke loudly, for silence felt sacred in that moment of leaving. Callis moved among them, steady, his presence a quiet anchor for many. He carried no weapon, only a torch wrapped carefully against the sea's spray. Beside him, others held bundles of offerings, bread, shells, and polished stones. They believed such gifts would please Poseidon, guiding them safely through water. The oracle stood apart, her gaze lifted as though watching unseen stars. She whispered words no one heard, but all felt a shiver in the air. When the tide reached its highest, the priest lifted his hand in blessing. "The sea calls," he said softly, "and we must answer with open hearts." One by one, the villagers climbed into the boats, their motions deliberate. The oars dipped, breaking the mirrored surface, sending ripples toward the rising sun. No wind stirred, yet the boats moved with purpose as though drawn forward. The shoreline grew smaller, swallowed by mist and memory, leaving only water. Callis kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, searching for signs of the path. The sea was not hostile, yet its silence carried a weight of mystery. Hours passed, broken only by the rhythm of oars and the cry of gulls. Then, faintly, the water began to glow with a light not of the sun. It shimmered below, ribbons of blue weaving patterns beneath their boats. The villagers gasped, some whispering prayers, others leaning close to see. Beneath the surface lay coral, radiant and alive, forming arches like gateways. It pulsed softly, as if breathing, guiding them into a realm of wonder. Callis felt his chest tighten, for this was the sign from the texts. The path of glowing coral, he whispered. It is here. The boats followed the luminous trail, drifting as though carried by unseen hands. The sea deepened, yet fear gave way to awe, for beauty surrounded them. Fish darted through light, their scales glittering like fragments of the sky. Children stared wide-eyed, their fear forgotten in the face of such marvels. Even the elders bowed their heads, humbled by the living miracle. As the boats moved farther, the glow grew stronger, wrapping them in radiance. The water reflected their faces in strange hues, as if touched by fire. Yet no heat rose, only cool waves, steady and eternal. Callis raised his torch, though unlit, feeling it answer with unseen warmth. He knew the flame was near, though still hidden beyond sight. At last, the coral parted, opening into a circle vast as a city. In its center, a column of light rose from the sea itself. It reached upward, endless, like fire held within water's embrace. The villagers trembled, awestruck, their breath stolen by the vision. This was no tale, no myth. This was the eternal flame alive before them. It did not flicker or burn, but glowed steady, calm, and infinite. The boats drifted to the circle's edge, resting as though commanded. No one dared move, for the presence of the divine filled the air. The oracle's voice rose then, carried by wind though her lips barely moved. The flame is not ours to claim, she said, but ours to honor. Her words echoed like song, weaving into the very rhythm of the waves. Callis lowered his head, tears stinging, though he did not understand why. The people knelt in their boats, silence deeper than any prayer before. For the sea had revealed its heart, and it burned with endless light. The journey had only begun, yet already destiny wrapped them in its tide. And within that glow, every soul felt both small and eternal. They knew they had found the threshold to Poseidon's most sacred gift. The circle of light lingered before them, vast and eternal, yet no path seemed clear. The villagers waited in silence, their boats drifting as if held by invisible hands. Callis gripped his unlit torch, feeling the weight of destiny press heavier. The oracle closed her eyes, lips moving in prayer that sounded older than words. Then the sea stirred, not with storm, but with a calm that deepened. From beneath the glowing coral rose figures, shaped like humans, yet not of flesh. They shimmered like water given form, eyes bright as moonlit waves. The villagers gasped, clutching one another, torn between awe and trembling. No voice was heard, yet the beings spoke directly into their minds. You who seek the flame, why have you come? The voices asked. Callis rose, his voice steady, carried by faith more than courage. We come not for power, but for guidance, he said. Our village is sinking, and the sea rises without mercy. We believe the eternal flame holds the memory of survival. The beings regarded him, their gazes deep as the ocean itself. Many have sought, they replied, yet few understood the cost of knowledge. The words rippled through the air, heavy and filled with warning. The villagers shifted uneasily, whispers stirring like leaves in wind. But Callis remained still, eyes unblinking, his heart open. "The flame is not for me alone," he said. "It is for all who dwell by the sea, bound to its tides." The water forms shimmered, their bodies rippling as though considering. Finally, they parted, revealing a path descending deeper beneath the waves. The coral arched overhead like a living cathedral, glowing with ethereal light. Callis stepped forward, his boat moving without his hand upon the oar. The others followed, fear melting into wonder as the passage welcomed them. As they traveled, visions began to rise upon the surface of the water. They saw images of ancient villages swallowed by floods long forgotten. They saw survivors guided by the same flame, carrying hope through ages. Generations upon generations appeared, each leaving offerings to the sea. The villagers watched, realizing they were not alone in their story. The flood was not punishment, but cycle, a rhythm of renewal. Callis felt the visions burn into his heart, not as burden, but gift. He understood now that the flame was not an object to possess. It was memory itself, a bond between sea and those who lived by it. The deeper they went, the brighter the water glowed, as if alive. The villagers felt warmth upon their skin, though no fire touched them. It was the warmth of belonging, of being remembered by the sea. At last, the path opened into a cavern vast as the night sky. In its center floated the flame, steady, luminous, infinite. It was neither fire nor water, but something between, eternal and whole. The villagers wept, their hearts overwhelmed by the beauty before them. The oracle lifted her hands, her voice trembling yet clear. "The flame is the covenant," she said. "It burns to remind us that we are never apart from the sea." Callis held his torch high, though it remained unlit. A spark leapt from the eternal flame, touching it with gentle light. The torch glowed, not consuming, but alive with soft radiance. The people gasped, for the light did not burn, it healed. It spread warmth through their bodies, easing fear, filling them with peace. Callis turned to them, the glow reflecting in his eyes. "We carry it not to rule, but to remember," he said. The villagers bowed their heads, reverence filling the chamber of light. The beings of water dissolved into the waves, their task complete. The cavern hummed with silence, yet it was full of presence. They knew their journey had only deepened, but so too had their bond. The eternal flame had accepted them, not as seekers, but as keepers. And as the cavern closed behind them, they felt the sea itself breathe. The sea carried them back with a gentleness that felt like a blessing. The boats drifted slowly, leaving the cavern of the flame behind. No words were spoken, for silence held more meaning than sound. The torch in Callis's hands glowed softly, its light steady and calm. It did not flicker, nor did it dim, though wind brushed its flame. The villagers sat in reverence, their eyes fixed upon that sacred glow. They felt warmth in their bones, as if the sea itself embraced them. Children leaned close, whispering that it looked like a star caught in wood. Elders wept quietly, hands trembling as they pressed prayers to their hearts. The oracle smiled faintly, her face lit by the soft, eternal fire. "This light is not for power," she said, "but for memory." Her words rippled through the boats, sinking into every listening soul. They reached the shoreline as dusk painted the horizon in red and gold. The villagers stepped onto the sand, their feet wet with returning waves. Behind them, the ocean glimmered as if holding secrets still unspoken. The torch remained bright, casting long shadows across the familiar ground. The village square filled with voices, hushed but eager, hearts heavy with wonder. People gathered close, bowing before the torch, their breaths caught in awe. Callis lifted it high, not as a ruler, but as a servant. "The sea has given us memory," he said, "and we must honor it." The priest nodded, his eyes moist, his voice breaking with reverence. "This is the covenant," he whispered, "the bond between tide and time." The people knelt together, their unity stronger than fear of the flood. The torch glowed brighter, as if responding to their devotion and hope. That night, the village did not sleep, but kept vigil under the stars. They placed offerings around the torch: bread, fruit, shells, and crafted trinkets. Children sang lullabies their mothers had sung, voices carried by salt wind. The flame did not consume, yet it filled the square with warmth. It was not fire as they knew it, but something greater, eternal. Dreams came to them as they rested near, dreams filled with light. They saw visions of ancestors walking along shores now long gone. They heard voices speaking of courage, endurance, and the rhythm of the sea. Each soul woke with a sense of belonging that could not be broken. The rising waters no longer felt like an ending, but a transformation. The flood was no longer terror, but passage, guided by the flame. Callis stood watch through the night, the glow steady in his hands. He thought of generations yet unborn, who would see this very light. It was not his alone, but for all who would listen to the sea. As dawn broke, the sky lit with hues that mirrored the flame's glow. The oracle stepped forward, her eyes wide with vision. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "The flame will guide us, but we must walk the path it reveals." Her voice carried truth, and the people felt both hope and weight. The sea had chosen them not for ease, but for remembrance. They would carry the flame, not to conquer, but to endure. As the sun rose higher, the villagers knew their lives had changed forever. No longer were they people clinging to land, fearful of the tide. They were keepers of memory, bound to the eternal covenant of water. And as the torch burned steady, they felt Poseidon's presence among them. The eternal flame was not a prize, but a promise that light would endure, even in the deepest flood. The days that followed were unlike any the village had known before. The torch remained at the heart of the square, glowing with steady light. It became a beacon, not only for the villagers, but for travelers from afar. Fishermen from distant shores arrived, guided by rumors of a flame that never died. They came with gifts of salt, pearls, and stories carried on the tide. The villagers welcomed them, offering bread, songs, and the warmth of community. All gathered around the torch at night, their voices blending in prayer and song. The flame seemed to listen, glowing brighter when hearts spoke with honesty. It was as if the sea itself sat with them, keeping vigil in silence. Children began to draw the flame in sand, shaping spirals and waves. They laughed as if they already knew the covenant would outlive them. Elders whispered that Poseidon's gaze lingered over the village, softened by their devotion. But the flame was not a gift without weight, and the oracle knew this well. She dreamed of storms rising, not to destroy, but to test their unity. She saw waters swallowing the coast, yet leaving paths for the faithful. One evening, she gathered the people by the square, her voice steady. "The flame will not protect us by itself," she said. "It guides, not guards. Her words rippled through the crowd, like a cold wind through reeds. Some nodded with resolve, others shifted uneasily, fear tugging at their faith. Callis stepped forward, holding the torch high, its light bathing his face. "The sea has not spared us hardship," he said, "but it has given us memory." He turned to the villagers, his eyes bright with conviction. "If we remember, we will endure. If we forget, we will be lost." The people bowed their heads, the truth sinking deeper than fear. That night, the sea rose higher than before, touching the edges of their homes. Waves curled gently, not in anger, but as a hand brushing against the shore. The villagers did not flee, but stood together, the torch at their center. The flame glowed stronger, its light reflecting on the restless surface of the sea. It was as though the ocean studied them, weighing their hearts in silence. Then the waves withdrew, leaving the sand wet but the village unharmed. The people fell to their knees, tears streaming, voices lifted in gratitude. "This is the covenant," the oracle said softly. "The sea tests, but it also remembers." From that night, the villagers began to live differently. They built boats not only for fishing, but for journeys of offering. Each month, they sailed to nearby islands. Carrying gifts of food and song, they lit smaller torches, touched by the eternal flame, and shared them. Other villages, once strangers, now joined in the covenant of memory. The coast grew alive with light, tiny flames glowing across distant shores. Together, they formed a circle of remembrance, bound by water and fire. Children grew up not fearing the flood, but preparing for its rhythm. They learned the songs of their ancestors, the prayers of their mothers. The flame became not just a symbol, but a way of life. It taught them that survival was not strength alone, but unity. And in unity, they found a peace deeper than the tide. Callis often sat by the flame at dawn, speaking softly to it. He would tell it of his dreams, his fears, and his gratitude. Though it never spoke back, he felt heard, and that was enough. The oracle, too, kept her watch, guiding the people with vision. She reminded them always, the flame is not ours to own. It is ours to carry, ours to protect, ours to remember. And so the covenant grew, not in silence, but in song and flame. The village had become more than a place. It was now a promise carried on the tide, bound to the eternal flame of Poseidon. The seasons turned, and the covenant grew stronger with each passing moon. The eternal flame still burned in the square, its glow steady and unchanging. It had become more than light. It was the heart of their daily lives. Children grew up seeing it as constant as the tides that shaped their world. Travelers from distant coasts spoke of it as legend, a fire untouched by time. Some came in doubt, but all left in reverence. Their hearts changed forever. The village became a place of gathering, where stories flowed like rivers. Songs were sung in many tongues, yet all carried the same devotion. The people understood now. They were no longer alone in their journey. Their covenant had become a bond across waters woven by the flame. But with growth came burden, and the oracle knew it well. She dreamed of voices rising, asking who truly held the covenant's trust. She saw shadows of pride like clouds drifting across a sunlit sea. For where light endures, the danger of forgetting its purpose lingers. One morning, she stood before the people, her gaze calm yet piercing. "The flame is memory," she said. "Not power, not possession." Her words fell heavy, and some bowed their heads in shame. Others whispered among themselves, wondering what storms she foresaw. Callis raised the torch, its glow mirroring the eternal flame. "This light belongs to none," he said. and to all in equal measure. The villagers nodded, though unease rippled quietly through the crowd. Later by the shore, Callis sat alone, the torch resting by his side. He watched the waves curl, endless, repeating, never claiming, never ending. He thought of generations yet to come who would inherit this memory. Would they remember it as covenant or mistake it for throne? As night fell, the sea stirred, not with fury, but with warning. The tide rose higher, pressing against the village like an unspoken question. The people gathered again, forming a circle around the flame. Their voices lifted in unison, prayers woven with gratitude and fear. The torch glowed brighter in Callis's hands, reflecting in the restless water. It was as if the sea itself waited for their answer. The oracle lifted her arms, her voice strong as wind across waves. "We are not rulers of the sea," she declared. "We are keepers of memory, children of tide and time." Her words settled like anchors, steadying hearts that had begun to drift. The tide calmed, the water retreating as though satisfied with their vow. Relief washed over the villagers, yet humility lingered deeper than joy. That night, dreams came again, shared by all who slept near the flame. They saw ancient cities drowned not by anger, but by forgetting. They saw people who once held light, but lost it to pride and silence. And they woke with resolve, their covenant renewed in quiet strength. From then on, the villagers vowed not only to carry the flame, they vowed to teach, to remind, to tell the stories without end. Children were taught to listen to the sea as much as their elders. Songs became prayers, and prayers became memory carved into daily life. Even as the waters rose, they did not despair, for they remembered. The flood was no longer an enemy, but a teacher with endless lessons. The oracle smiled at dawn, her heart eased by the people's unity. She knew storms would come again, but so too would remembrance. For the eternal flame burned not only in the square, but in their hearts. And as long as they kept its memory, they would never be lost. The covenant was alive, stronger than the flood, deeper than the sea. It was their inheritance, their promise, their bond with Poseidon eternal. The years passed, and the village lived in rhythm with tide and time. The eternal flame still burned in the square, steady, calm, eternal. Children who once played in its glow now stood as keepers of memory. Callis, older now, carried the torch with hands weathered by salt and years. The oracle, her hair silver as moonlit waves, watched with a knowing smile. The covenant had endured, not because of one, but because of all. The villagers had learned that the sea was not enemy, nor master. It was kin, vast and untamed, yet bound to them by remembrance. The flood still came, rising higher, reshaping the coast with each season. But the people no longer feared, for they remembered the flame's promise. Boats carried them to new homes, yet always the flame guided them. Wherever they went, the covenant traveled, burning brighter than distance. The torch passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. No one claimed it, yet all carried it, as Poseidon had willed. The songs of the flame spread to distant shores, echoing across waters. Strangers became kin, bound by memory, drawn into the circle of light. The coastlines glowed with countless flames, each lit from the eternal fire. Together they became constellations upon the earth, stars that never set. One night, Callis stood by the shore, the torch glowing in his hand. He gazed at the horizon, where sea and sky melted into eternity. The flame reflected in his eyes, not as burden, but as blessing. The oracle joined him, her voice soft, carried by the wind. "The sea remembers," she said, "because we choose to remember." He nodded, his heart at peace, knowing the covenant would outlive him. As dawn broke, children gathered around, their laughter echoing across waves. They danced in the sand, drawing spirals that mirrored the flame's glow. The elders watched, tears bright, for they saw the covenant alive in them. It was no longer fragile, no longer uncertain. It was eternal. When Callis finally placed the torch upon the altar, it burned brighter still. He smiled, whispering a prayer not for himself, but for all to come. The sea stirred gently, waves rising in rhythm like breath of a god. It was not farewell, but recognition, a blessing upon their faith. The villagers lifted their voices. Their song carried far across waters. It mingled with the wind, with the tide, with the very heartbeat of the sea. And in that moment, the covenant was whole, unbroken, everlasting. The eternal flame of Poseidon burned, not as fire alone. It burned as memory, as promise, as bond between mortal and divine. It reminded them that though floods may rise, light endures. Though lands may fade, memory flows like tide without end. Though time may pass, the covenant remains, as eternal as the sea. And so the story of the flame was not ended, but continued. It lived in song, in prayer, in every heart that carried its glow. It lived in boats that braved storms, in children who sang to waves. It lived in hands that passed the torch, never clinging, always sharing. The people had become keepers of more than fire. They had become keepers of time, of memory, of eternal belonging. The sea stretched endless before them, yet no longer unknown. For wherever the waters led, the flame would follow, unyielding. And as the sun set, casting gold upon the horizon, the oracle spoke. "The flame is eternal," she said, "because love is eternal." Her words lingered, weaving into the tide, into the song of the sea. And with that truth, the story carried on, forever.